The type of business ownership refers to the legal structure a business chooses to operate with. It is a crucial element of setting up a business and one which entrepreneurs must think very carefully about. They can choose to run their business in a number of ways, including as a sole trader, in a partnership, or even as a private limited company, amongst other options. However, each of these will influence the business throughout its existence, such as the owner's financial liability if the business runs into financial difficulty, how the business pays tax, and the way management decisions are made about the business. This video will introduce the common options a business owner has alongside some benefits and drawbacks of each with supporting examples. Firstly, we're going to start with sole traders. A sole trader is often referred to as self-employed or sole proprietor and describes any business that is owned and controlled by one person. In 2019, this type of business ownership made up approximately 59% of the total private sector business population in the UK, with a staggering 3.5 million registered sole traders. A business owner can still register as a sole trader, even if they have employees and are often individuals who provide a specialist service such as plumbers, hairdressers or photographers. Legally, there is no separate business entity, meaning there is no distinction between the business owner's personal and professional assets and liabilities. Therefore, a sole trader is personally liable for the business's debts and may have to pay for the losses made by the business out of their own pocket. There's a number of benefits to registering as a sole trader. Firstly, it's very easy to set up and provides the owner with complete freedom to make decisions as they see fit. Also, the typical sole trader business will have low startup costs. However, most important to some, the sole trader keeps 100% of the business's profits. Whilst this all sounds great, there are a number of drawbacks to consider when starting a business as a sole trader. As discussed earlier, unlimited liability heightens the risk for the business owners. Also, a sole trader is fully responsible for the business and may at times feel lonely and very pressured, whilst the typical sole trader will work extremely long hours, and also take on additional roles of running a business to reduce costs such as admin, bookkeeping and marketing, just to name a few. Moving on to partnerships. These are businesses that are similar in nature to a sole trader but are legally owned by two or more people. Typical examples of partnerships are skilled people and professionals who decide to set up a business together, such as tradespeople, dentists and solicitors. A partnership agreement is a key legal document which is agreed and signed by all partners of the business, and it covers all the key legalities of the business, such as how management decisions are made and how profits are going to be shared. There are also two other versions of business partnerships. These are limited partnerships and limited liability partnerships. However, these will be covered in greater detail in a separate video if you wanted to find out more. Importantly, the basic partnership agreement still means the business owners have unlimited liability just like a sole trader, yet all liabilities and debt will be shared out equally between the business's partners, depending on their share in the business, as is all the profits and assets. A key advantage of a partnership is the shared expertise it provides the owners, alongside the benefit of teamwork which can reduce working hours. Whilst a typical partnership would have low startup costs, it also has the benefit of greater borrowing power as there are more people involved to share the debt and more people to raise investment capital into the business during its lifetime. However, the main disadvantage of a partnership comes from the disagreements that can happen over key business decisions, and if one partner feels they are working harder than the other, this can really cause some tension in the business, whilst the action of one partner could also have a negative impact on all of the partners involved in the business. And one final disadvantage of a partnership is that profits have to be shared out between all partners. Moving on to private limited companies. In comparison to sole traders and partnerships, a private limited company is owned by its shareholders, who are typically the directors of the business, and shares cannot be offered to the general public. You may also see a private limited company with the abbreviation LTD after their name. And a private limited company is an incorporated business, which means that the business is actually classed as a company and has its own separate legal entity in the eyes of the law. Therefore, the ownership of a limited company is divided up into equal parts called shares, and the owners are now classed as shareholders. This is a completely different structure to sole traders and partnerships that we've just looked at. Unlike a sole trader or partnership, the owners of a limited company are not necessarily involved in the running of the business, unless they have been elected to the board of directors. Common examples of private limited companies are local retailers such as high street shops or restaurants that do not have a national presence. Mars Inc. is also a famous example of a private limited company. Although they have a huge worldwide presence, they've chosen not to go public to ensure they retain the family values of the business and fear these would be lost if they operated as a public limited company. This is also the same scenario at Dyson. Importantly, the term limited in private limited company means that all the debt of the business is separate from the individual shareholders. Therefore, they are not personally liable and won't lose their personal assets should the business suffer from financial hardship. Another key advantage of being a private limited company is that it's much more tax efficient than a sole trader or partnership business model. However, whilst the owners hold shares in the company, the assets and any profits that are generated also belong to the company. Therefore, getting paid can be more complicated for a shareholder than it is for a business owner who operates as a sole trader or in a partnership. This is because the director of a private limited company has to legally transfer money to you in the form of a salary or dividend payment. Also, operating as a private limited company has greater admin costs and increased legal requirements in comparison to sole traders and partnerships. In addition to this, legally the company has to publicly disclose key information which not all owners would want to share willingly. Moving on to public limited companies. Just like a private limited company, a public limited company is owned by its shareholders and run by its directors. It has a key advantage of limited liability and is often referred to as a PLC. Public limited companies are often seen as a more prestigious business, but are often less common, and they only actually make up approximately 5% of all the limited companies in the UK. However, PLCs have more legal requirements and paperwork in comparison to sole traders, partnerships and even private limited companies. The key advantage for a business which operates as a public limited company is that it has the option to offer shares to the public via the stock exchange, which is a fantastic way of generating additional capital for the business. It is common for a private limited company to make the decision to go public through a process of flotation. Once a business goes public, it has the opportunity to receive investment through the sale of shares, commonly from investment banks, pension funds and wealthy individuals. However, it's very important to note that the original owners can lose control and ownership of the business, with the potential for the company to be taken over if a majority of the shareholders agree to bid. An example of a public limited company is Starbucks, and more recently Snapchat or Snap Inc., which went public in 2017 with stocks soaring 44% on their first day of trading, valuing the company at $28 billion. Although the tech enterprise on paper was making a loss, it propelled its co-founders into the top tier of tech billionaires. The final type of business ownership we're going to look at is franchising. This is an alternative to setting up a business from scratch. It allows the entrepreneur to acquire a proven business model and use its brands and products to open up a new store. An extremely famous franchise model is McDonald's. This allows an entrepreneur to open up a fast food restaurant with all of McDonald's famous branding, store layouts, technology and products to provide them with guaranteed custom in comparison to setting up an independent fast food restaurant from scratch. At this point, I would recommend you to all watch The Founder, which is a film based on the story of how Ray Kroc turned McDonald's into one of the world's biggest franchises. It's a great watch for anyone interested in business. Now, there are two key stakeholders in a franchise: the franchisee and the franchisor. The franchisee is a person who purchases the rights to the franchise from the franchisor. The franchisor is a person or company that owns the trademarks and business model and receives payments from the franchisee. Now, there are a number of key advantages to running a franchise. Firstly, the owner gets a proven business system and training from the franchisor on how to use it, which minimises the problems faced by most business startups. Also, the franchisee benefits from economics of scale when purchasing materials and supplies, as well as advertising and negotiations for store locations. This is in comparison to a sole trader who would have to negotiate on their own, which would typically see them pay more or get less favourable terms. However, as you'd imagine, in return for the use of a trademark and ongoing support from the franchisor, the franchisee has to pay an initial fee and ongoing royalties to the franchisor. This can be quite costly. a franchise also has a few more key disadvantages to consider, such as the restrictions and often monitoring of business performance on the franchisee by the franchisor, whilst any alterations or improvement the franchisee wants to make to the business may get rejected by the franchisor as it doesn't suit the business's typical or traditional model. This can really frustrate the entrepreneur who purchased a franchise, as they don't have the freedom and flexibility that the typical business owner would have. Well, I hope this has been a helpful introduction to the different types of business ownership available, and if it has, remember to give the video a thumbs up and subscribe for lots more business studies videos. There is also an activity worksheet in the description of this video if you would like to test your knowledge further. Thank you for listening and all the best.